I always tell everybody my greatest fear isn't speaking. My greatest fear is technology. Again, I pretty much just went through a review of what we were doing last week. Let me get my PowerPoint back up, and then we'll go from there. So, we were just talking about how important it is for all these different aspects of your business. I'm not going to go back through them again, but wanted to really jump into kind of the next part of this is that, what I call the success formula. After everything that I've seen and in working with clients, there's 6 major attributes that literally lead to success. Clarity plus grit plus skills plus incentives plus resources plus action plan equals success. With all of the clients I've worked with all of the businesses I've worked with, when these 6 components are in there and integrated together, they really create a successful outcome. And number 1 is clarity. I have so many people that have told me that, the 2020 is the year of clarity, because 2020 represents perfect vision. And literally, it's such a true statement that if you're not real clear on where you're going, any road will take you there. And I think there's so much confusion out in the marketplace right now because people don't know how to navigate. They don't have clarity on what it is they're supposed to do on a personal and professional level. And so in the absence of clarity, people either do nothing, remain the status quo, or obviously look for what other people are doing and try to emulate that. So clarity is so important. To take clarity out of this 6-step formula, it leads to confusion. If you're not clear about where you're going and you do starts and stops, you'll become confused in the process. If you don't have a clear goal on what it is that you want to accomplish on a personal and professional level, then it's going to be difficult, again, to move in that direction. The second one is grit. Grit literally is kind of a cross-section of perseverance and passion. I read a study not too long ago that said the number 1 indicator of success is what they call grit. And grit is just the tenacity and perseverance to stick to it when other people would give up. And it's also combining what you're really passionate about along with your perseverance. And if you take grit out of this equation, it leads to indecisiveness. It can lead to weakness. You can be timid in the process of making a decision and taking action to move forward. The third one is skills, and skills is the human aspect of this. The skills are the people that work in your organization or the skills that you have in order to be the best at whatever you're particularly striving to do or to become. And if you take the skills and you don't have the human resources, it creates anxiety on the other end. And then the fourth one is incentives. Incentives is what motivate most of us. Incentives are the reason we show up to work. Incentives aren't always financial. They have to do with why you're coming to work. They have to do with encouraging and uplifting other people that you work with, being acknowledged for a job well done, a pat on the back. A lot of times is just as incentivizing as a financial contribution as well. And if you don't have incentives in your success formula, you're going to have an unmotivated team, and an unmotivated team is a recipe for chaos and disaster. And then the fifth attribute is resource.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I think when we got cut off, your PowerPoint actually was taken off of the screen. If you could go down to the bottom of your screen and just share that PowerPoint one more time.
Boy, I'm doing all the technology faux pas today. All right.
Perfect. That's it. Thank you so much.
All right, great. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And so, here we are is the vision of what I've been talking about. And we're just down on the resource side. And again, for anybody that might have missed some of this, I'll make this information available through Rome for anybody that wants it. our resources. Our resources our actual finances, our actual hardware, software, the things that we need to manage and run our businesses. And obviously, right now, in the midst of most of our businesses being challenged with the coronavirus, our resources are really lacking right now. And I'm sure that a lot of you are very frustrated, because that's what happens when you take out the resources. Even though you have all these other things in there, it becomes very frustrating. And then finally, the last one is a plan of action, an action plan. And if you take out the action plan, it will lead to a false start. You know, you'll start to go down one road, find out it's the wrong road. And sometimes you have to do that naturally anyway. But again, having a plan and having clarity on where you want to go, and having the grit and determination to see it through, having the skills yourself personally and collectively as a team, along with the proper incentives and resources combined into a plan of action, really are the key components to a successful business, and the things that will help you through these challenging times to look at, you know, where is my business or my personal plan lacking one of these, and then what can I do to shore it up and make that happen. So again, I think we've got my voice back. I think we have our visual back. I apologize for that, and hopefully no more faux pas throughout the rest of this presentation. So again, a favorite quote: "It's not enough to do your best. Have to know what to do, and then do your best." And that comes from clarity. And again, my favorite quote: "Clarity without action is a daydream. Action without clarity is a nightmare." You need to have both of those components. A clear vision of where you're going, what steps you need to take, and then go out there and take action. And you learn from taking action. If I haven't said it before, I'll say it again. I'm a ready, fire, aim type of guy. I like to take action to find out what the customer's going to tell me, to find out what the environment's going to tell me, rather than trying to figure it all out on the front end. Let's go out and test something and make something happen, and see what those results are. And Charlie's going to talk a bit about that too. So last week we talked about these 5 keys to building a great brand. I just wanted to refresh. I don't want to dive into these. Identify your USP, positioning, deliver value, listen to your customer, and literally what we're going to focus on mostly today is this timeless marketing. And the reason we're doing this, because as we discussed last week, that when you build a brand, when you build something that's uniquely different, when you build something that's positioned differently than other things that are in your competitive category, you not only can charge more money, but the competition, the higher up you go, is less and less and less. And you can you can charge typically anywhere from 25 to 30% more for your branded product or service than you could if you're just out here dealing in some of these lower areas that we talked about last week. So what is the difference between an e-commerce site and a website? And I'd like to bring my colleague, Charlie Johnson, on board here. Charlie, as I expressed before, is probably one of the best digital marketing, I call him a ninja, that I've ever met. Who really understands the customer journey, which we're going to talk about, and all of the nuances that go into making a e-commerce site an e-commerce site. And again, my 10 cents into this, the difference between an e-commerce and website is, if your e-commerce site does not get somebody to pull up their credit card like this young lady is on the left and take action, then it really isn't accomplishing what it's supposed to do. So Charlie, welcome. And if you want to unmute yourself and come in and talk a little bit about e-commerce versus website, appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, Steve. Thanks for the intro. Yeah, so just to touch on what Steve said, I think, like a website can have products on it, and then you can just throw up, let's say, gift cards. You can throw up your book on your website. But it's what really differentiates an e-commerce site from a website is going to be the focus on the funnel and the customer journey, and that's something we'll touch on later. That from the second that person goes on your website, what path they're going to take. And that path is going to lead them to ultimately entering their credit card information, ordering your book or your gift card or whatever it is. And then eventually also part of that customer journey is when they receive that, coming back and being a return customer and essentially trying to make them a customer for life, right?
Yeah, great. And do most people know, Charlie, whether they have a website or e-commerce site? I mean, is it a decision that most people make from the get-go? Or, again, I know from my perspective, going back years, it was like the website was the be-all and end-all, and you'd throw it up, and I had products on there, and I hadn't sold a lot of products from my website. So are most people aware whether they have a website or an e-commerce website?
Yeah. That's a great question. I think, as the years go on, more and more websites are actually just starting out as e-commerce sites because there's so much money in that, and that's really, these businesses are centering themselves around this. I mean, all of the clients we work with, some of them have physical store locations, but I mean that accumulates to 10% of the revenues maybe, right? I mean, there's just so much money in e-commerce, and these businesses are literally, they have hundreds of employees and they're just focused solely essentially on the website. That is their storefront now, right? So I think it can start out as one thing, but at the end of the day, if the business follows where the dollars go, it's going to end up just being, the focus on e-commerce.
Great. And so, talk us through a little bit kind of, we collaborate on some of these things here, really understanding, the flow from kind of conception to the end of it. You want to talk through the process a little bit and why this is so important?
Yeah. So, I mean, the conception of an idea, I mean, everyone has ideas, right? I'm sure all of us have had ideas. And then 2 years later, you see it on TV and someone else is selling that product and you're like, oh, I could have thought of that, right? So I think what really differentiates that is being able to say, okay, this is an idea. Let's bring it to market. And then let's know why a customer would buy it and why the customer would continue to come back. So, I mean, the really interesting thing is nowadays, back in the day, there was a very high cost barrier to entry in terms of getting your product to the market and then getting eyeballs on it, right? And the platforms we use, and I mean, basically the advertisements, we're getting all of these customers to this business for. I mean, you can put $5 to $10 in it. It's Facebook Ads Manager, Snapchat Ads Manager, and that can then be seen by 2,000 people, and you can get an idea of if that's going to work or not based on various analytics, right? So I think that's such a shift. You don't need to go get a $2,000 TV commercial anymore. You don't need to go to the billboard next to the highway. With a very low budget, you can actually go to market and test whether a product or a website or whatever your idea is going to work or not. And so that really, I think, is the central part of the strategy. Would you agree, Steve?
Yeah, and I just remember kind of going back, to the old days of infomercials. Would have to spend $250,000 or $300,000 to produce a show. Would have to go out and spend several $100,000 just to test to see if it would work, and then again it would be test and analyze, and again, just a really key restatement of what Charlie said is we literally can go out now and test for a couple $1,000 to really validate whether a product or a service is going to connect with the target audience, in this process that we talked about. And everything we do is done through this process of really understanding on the front end as much as we possibly can, learning more through research and messaging, and then the number crunching and what happens behind the black curtain, the algorithms of Facebook and Google. Charlie and his team are one of the best of anybody I've ever worked with. And then, we have kind of a sixth phase of a strategic digital advertising process. You want to just walk us through that one at a time here?
Yeah, great. Let me pull this up so I can ensure that we're on the same page here. Okay, so yeah, I mean, so we can kind of go through these one by one, but I think it all kind of goes back to what we were saying, right? Do you just want to pull them all up so I can talk through them like that? Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so as we were saying, yeah, so let's say you have this idea and you want to go to market with it, right? So that would be the campaign strategy. And then, we could sit down and we could say, okay, how are we going to get the eyeballs on this, right? And the content is really, really important because you can take a photo on your iPhone now that is actually better than what is taken by a professional photographer in a studio. And it's actually a lot more native to the platform, which is really important because, like Steve said, back in the day with infomercials, that had to be a $10,000, $20,000 project with a lot of people working on that behind the scenes, right? Just to get that to that point. Nowadays, I can have a product in my hands. It could be a bracelet. I could snap a photo of that. And because it's such native content on these platforms, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, it will actually likely perform better than a very professionally done commercial that, it may give you a lot of info, but it's just not entertaining. And then the entertaining part is what really differentiates marketing nowadays than what it was 20 years ago, right? You have to earn those eyeballs. People can skip past your ads. I mean, they have no obligation to watch your ads. And actually, if there is any obligation, and it kind of hinders the performance of that, right? So you want to earn those eyeballs and you want to make the ads and the content as entertaining as possible. And so that's really the most important part about the content evaluation. So we don't want pictures of, let's say you're selling coffee. We don't want a picture of just the coffee bag. We want it to really embody the lifestyle and what you're going to get with that coffee bag. Let's say, use that as an example. And so, okay, so yeah, we put that ad out. We get it out to the market. We see the data. So we're going to evaluate that. And what we like to do is we always want to be at least A/B testing, right? So we want to say, even if we don't get results from this, we want to at least have a takeaway from it. So we could spend $100, $1,000, whatever it is. We want to say, okay, so we didn't get, let's say, the sales, but we at least know this works better than this, and we can move forward with the strategy. So that's really what I would say, the data evaluation, campaign creation. So then we take it to the next step, right? And it's like, okay, so we know what we're going to go with, and then what audience do we now want to put this to? So, I mean, that's the crazy part about these advertising platforms. Now, like Steve said, with an infomercial back in the day, you throw that up, even with Super Bowl commercials, you don't exactly know who is going to be seeing that. I mean, sure, it's going to be families. It's going to be all American in that case. But we can say we want 13 to 18-year-olds who are women to see this ad and that have interest in X or have shopped in physical locations. I mean, the data is just incredible that we can use to do this. So it's very, very highly targeted. And then we can also see the data and the analytics based on those specifically targeted brackets, right? So it's especially great if you want to keep your budget low, you can just make sure the right people are seeing this ad. And then that's basically touched on data analytics there. And then, yeah, I mean, basically repeat. So just that entire process, you're just going to keep iterating on and improving every single time. And that's what's going to essentially get you to be a leader in your market and
yeah. And it's ironic because you talked about, getting eyeballs. There's an actual statistic that a goldfish will stare at you through a goldfish bowl for 9.2 seconds. The average person will look at a website for 7 seconds. And if you don't grab their attention, they're flipping to the next thing. So it's so really important in the process of doing this, as Charlie said, to know who your target audience is and what the message is that resonates with them in order to keep them in there. So, and let's talk about, customer journey a little bit, because this is really where a lot of people miss the boat, where they might have a nice looking website, but they can't, check out at the back end, or they might have really great content on their website and products, but there's not very good photos or something on the front end, so they lose the eyeball. So just talk a little bit about the customer journey that we talk about so much. It's so important.
Yeah, so this is an area where you can really differentiate yourself and your business in the market, because this is something that frankly just stresses a lot of people out. And when they look at it, they're like, how can we control the customer journey from the time that person first sees our logo or clicks on our website to when they receive that package and they send the picture to their friends and they visit the website again? You have to take a step back and say, that's what really is going to differentiate me. So overall, it's just at the start, it's essentially just the purchase funnel. And that's what you can see there on the left. And the repurchase thing is actually what a lot of people are investing in nowadays, that I think actually is basically cheap. in terms of that you don't have to, you've already paid to acquire these customers, right? So you bring them through that process, you get them to purchase. Let's say they bought, again, we'll use the bracelet example. They get it in a black bag, loose in the bag, and there's no note in there, there's nothing like that. They're not going to think very highly of your brand. However, if you have very nice put together packaging, and this is one example we like to use. I have this bottle right here, actually. So this is a direct consumer brand. So it's a just beautiful bottle, right? So once you get this, you don't want to throw this away. I mean, this is sitting next to my desk right here just because it looks nice. It's nice to look at, and I think I should fill it up with water now, right? So that is just free real estate. So if you can really maximize that repurchase right there. I mean, I've been back to their website and I've purchased 3 separate times just because their packaging was so good, just because the product looks so good. And those are the things that it's interesting because we love the data and we love the analytics, but it doesn't make a direct impact on those, a measurable impact, let me say. But you'll notice you start really focusing on those things and your returning customer, it's going to go up. You're going to have more people raving about your product, and it's going to add a lot of value there. It's not quantifiable necessarily when a lot of the stuff is, but the value that is available for you to tap into is just immense there.
Yeah. Great point. I mean, just think of Apple box when you get your iPhone or when you get your computer. I still have all my boxes because I don't want to throw them away. Or, again, Tiffany jewelry box. It's a part of building the brand and the message of you connecting with your target audience, and then giving them a higher likelihood to want to repurchase your product, not just repurchase it, but also do organic marketing for you, that they will like your product so much, just like Charlie did. He just held it up, and now all of you are aware of a brand that you probably never heard of before. But that's how this whole process works. Is the key in this whole definition here is the word engagement, and hence the name of the company, Engage. Is the whole point is not just to push content at people, it's to get people engaged in whatever your content is. And there's a big difference between pushing content and engaging people, and then an even bigger difference on building a bridge to monetize that engagement. And there's very few people that really know how to do that. So, the question is, do you have a customer journey with your business or service that you offer? Is it easy for people to navigate? Do they know what your value proposition is? When you go and click on your website, would I look at it for 7 seconds and jump to the next one? Or would I be engaged to want to learn more and go deeper? These are all things that you need to start looking at and being able to apply to your own businesses as you look at how you need to pivot in these challenging times to make your business relevant. So good input there. So go ahead.
Just a quick example there. Yeah. So, and I mean, everyone knows of the most customer-centric, customer journey-focused company being Amazon. I mean, Jeff Bezos basically pioneered this on a huge scale. And one of his quotes, just to summarize it, is you have to take those questions out of the customer's mind before they even know they have them. So let's say it's an apparel brand. The customers right away are going to want to know what's the return process, how much do I have to pay for shipping. If you put that stuff up front, you're going to minimize the drop off at that point of the customer journey, which would be them on your website, and you're going to lead them in and raise basically the numbers of them actually going to the add to cart step and moving on from there.
Yeah, and so here's a few of the clients. Can you just talk a little bit kind of these are customers and clients that have already been through that 6-step learning process. Yeah. Again, one is Charlie's client, one we've worked on together, and one he developed by himself. So why don't you talk a little bit about the 3 different brands here?
Yeah, so God is Dope is an Atlanta-based apparel brand, and they're one of those companies that they have a physical location in Atlanta, and that's the avenue that they kind of felt like they were going down. And when they started working with us, they're a very successful company. They'd already done millions in revenue, and their biggest day to that point, I think, in terms of daily revenue, was about $40,000 to $50,000, and we've been working with them for just about a year now. And just on April 1st. And this is something we could talk about at a different time, making your own kind of sale. We did actually an April 1st, April Fool's sale. And in one day, they did $640,000 in revenue. So just in that year, we've taken them from doing their best day ever as being 50,000 in one day. And that was, I think, Black Friday, granted. So it's a higher purchase rate on that day, to $640,000 in one day. I mean, it's basically just unheard of. And that's just been an absolute focus on the customer journey and step one all the way through to their packaging. And the repeat customer rate that day was 55%, which is just huge, right? I mean, that is just free purchases. You don't have to pay again to acquire those customers. You've already acquired them. You just have to communicate with them, constantly communicate, provide them a good service at a good price, and they're going to return. So that's an example of really doing this at like a very high revenue level, right? And so then Aurel is a swimsuit brand that I actually own. And so kind of at some point about a year ago, I was like, okay, so I have all of these ideas I'm doing for all these companies. Why not do it for myself, right? So this was, I mean, obviously February 2019, $0 in revenue. Just the other day, I mean, we're at between $10,000 and $15,000 in daily revenue now. So a few million a year in revenue. And that's just been taking these principles and applying it to, this was a market that we felt like that there was a gap in, right? That there is no company taking these Amazon type customer centric approaches, really focusing on delivering customer value via price, via the product quality, via the free returns and the fast shipping, just really maximizing every one of those areas and focusing on the customer to the point that now we're having customers just the free exposures. I mean, incredible. They're telling all their friends to come shop there. They're posting pictures on their Instagram left and right. So that is just, the client or the brand we've used to kind of embody all of these things that we're talking about. And then He Would Love First is a brand that I got in touch with, I think in March of 2019 as well, so about a year ago. And it's such a great idea. So it's what is the answer to what would Jesus do? And Casey, the founder of it, just came up with this. He was actually in college class and he wrote on a piece of paper, and it's He Would Love First. And it's, I mean, to see the picture, they should honestly put it on their website. It's awesome. It's he just drew the bracelet and it's h.w.lf. And so when we got in touch with him, he had sold, I think, a few thousand through his initial website and through his Instagram. And we basically came in and we said, okay, let's turn this into a Shopify store, an actual e-commerce site. And they just the other day eclipsed over $1 million in revenue. And I mean, their year-over-year growth is, I think, Steve, we looked at the percentage before, it's just some insane percentage, right?
And again, this was one of the first projects that Charlie and I worked on together. And not only did we change the marketing, but the strategy. We went through their pricing and asked, well, why do you charge this price for your product? And they were like, well, we don't know. And we literally said, well, let's double the price and see what impact this has. Yeah. And literally it had zero impact. They were selling 20,000 units a month.
Yeah.
And again, everything we do is test and analyze, and it's very cost effective to do it. And as you're sitting here, listening to this, I would encourage you, go click on those websites so you can see what a good e-commerce site looks like, and understand all of the 6 steps and strategies that we're talking about, that go into making a successful program. This is something that, it's a picture of Charlie smiling because numbers don't lie. I mean, it's everything that we do here is test and analyze. And these are just some of the analytics. So you just want to talk real briefly about that because I want to leave time for questions here too.
Yeah. So I think this is actually a Shopify dashboard. So some of you may have seen this before, and these are just some of the specific analytics that we like to focus on. And obviously, basically in all of those, you can see that kind of upward trend, right? And then there's some of those that are, we like to focus on more than the others. But at the end of the day, your company's revenue is going to be a combination of the conversion rate, which you can see there on the left, multiplied by the average order value. And then somewhere along in that equation comes a returning customer, right? Because that's those people that you're getting purchases and sales for free, right? So if you can at least dashboard those metrics and those for your company and your brand, and you attempt and focus on improving those on a month-to-month basis, you're going to see that top line revenue increase with those. Because let's say your conversion rate's 1.5%. If you can even improve that by 10%, that means that 10% of sales are just going to come from thin air. You're getting the same amount of traffic and your sales are going to increase by 10%. So you don't have to pay any more money in ads. That's just improvements you could make on your website. to your wording on places, to your product photos, to all the existing things that you already have. And it's essentially free top line growth there, right? And then again, returning customer rate. That's going to be a thing that's going to be a lot of focus on the kind of back end of the customer journey, that a lot of people, it's like, okay, you've already got that sale, why focus on that? But that's going to be that free growth there. And there's kind of arbitrage in that. A lot of brands don't take advantage of that. They just use fulfillment centers to just ship out the product. Okay, great, the customer purchased it, let's forget about it. Maybe we'll send them an email at some point trying to sell them another one. If you really, really make a connection with the customer there on that point, you're going to see a lot of growth and a lot of free revenue. I like to call it free from there as well. And then average order values, that's just a great example of, you already have that person on your website. You already know that 1.5% of them are going to convert. Let's get them, like Steve's saying, to increase the average order value, increase your prices, at least test it. I mean, what's the worst case, right? You change your prices back. So just increasing the average order value is going to be able to get you additional top line growth there with essentially no investment needed other than ideas and time.
And again, this all comes back down to test and analyze, and we don't throw money blindly into marketing spends. It's done strategically, and it's part art and part science. The numbers tell you and give you the results, and these numbers are like available within days of running your ads. So it's not like we have to wait 30 days or a month or 2 months. And it's constantly in flux and looking at how do we make it better. And here's, one of the pictures actually from He Would Love First. And again, just going through the 4 attributes of what it needs to do. And Charlie, why don't you just kind of run through those real quick and talk.
Yeah, and so that's something we discussed earlier with the content, right? So let's say we gave all of you guys these 5 bracelets and we did a little exercise and we said, okay, try to develop the best photo for ad or marketing purposes that you think you could come up with. If you take a lot of elements from this, you're going to be very successful in that endeavor, right? So you have the kind of ethos of the brand shown with the smiling face in the background, with her proudly putting those in front of the camera. Very bright, attention-grabbing colors, because that's important with the native flow of that's going to be shown on the Instagram feed or a Facebook feed, or it's going to pop up on someone's Snapchat feed, right? So that's really important to focus on there. And then let's see, variety of products. Yeah, and then the variety of products shown, right? We could show 1 bracelet, but instead we're going to show you the 5 bracelets. And you can go to the website and you can choose between those 5. You can purchase all 5, and we're going to make sure that looks like a very good decision for you to do that. And so there's just a lot of little details and a lot of effort put there, because that's going to be your first exposure to the customer and the consumer, right? Yeah.
And this is not a professional model. This was shot from an iPhone. It's probably one of the guy's girlfriends or work. And literally that encompasses everything when it comes to presenting the emotion, the color, the background, and getting people to stop and look and more importantly, take the next step to actually purchase what you're doing. And then, the last slide is just, this is one that a client that we work with, we talked about Suzanne before, but literally have incorporated in the last 2 weeks all of these things into her e-commerce site. And Suzanne, whose business was, 3 or 4 weeks ago, down almost 90% in revenue, has now recaptured a lot of that revenue back by making some strategic pivots in the way she did business. 90% of her business was sit down, walking in her door. Now 90% of it, from the bricks and mortar standpoint, is going out the door. But launching the website on a very minimal budget has literally now accounted for about 25% of her revenues, and is literally going to outgrow her bricks and mortar strategy. So, look, this works for big businesses. This works for little businesses. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it works for everybody, because you have to have a lot of those attributes that we talked about before in order to apply the knowledge that we have to help your business or to help your service position itself, present itself appropriately on the website, and have that website transition from a a place to come and be educated to one that's an e-commerce site that's actually going to create a customer journey and experience where they want to purchase something, and we make that as easy as possible for them to do that. So I know there's a bunch of questions because I see the chat room kind of lighting up. So do you want to give us some questions to answer, Natalie?
Yeah, we have quite a few questions. The first one is from Rich Casanova, who's one of our members, and he said, what are some techniques to keep visitors on your website for more than 7 seconds? And what are the best ways to convert a visitor to a customer?
Yeah. Those are two great questions there. So I'll address the first one. So a technique that I really like using is taking that. So let's imagine they're a first-time visitor, right? And we want to keep them there for more than 7 seconds. Me and you, who've looked at that website tens of thousands of times or however much it is, aren't really going to be the expert or the person who should be making that decision. So what I like to do is I like to go people who I know are in my audience. It might be my girlfriend's friends or my parents, for example. Send them the website and kind of ask them to give me their honest feedback and what questions they would have or what things they think we should change about it. Because that'll show you really what is going through a first-time visitor's head in a way that we can't even see. And so just by doing that, you're going to learn, and you don't have to implement all those things, but you're going to learn some specific things, and especially if you do it with 10 people and you see 5 or 6 of them say, I don't understand this, or I don't know this, or this isn't really catching my attention. Then you make that change and you'll see those numbers incrementally increase over time. And I mean, that's the type of thing. You don't need to go hire some super expensive $100 an hour consultant to tell you that you can utilize anyone you know to give you that type of feedback, because that's going to be the mindset people are going to be going to your website and having, right? They've never seen it before. They've never heard of it before. So you can utilize these people who have that exact mindset right now to tell you the things you need to know. And then Natalie, sorry, I missed the second part of the question or just forgot it.
How do we convert them?
Okay, yeah. So how do you convert them? Yeah. So I think we kind of mentioned it earlier, and a big part of that is using that same mindset and understanding what questions and what reasons these people are going to have for not buying and addressing those right away. So if you feel like doing some homework after this, you could go look at the Arrow website, because that's really like my brainchild. I like to play with basically everything on there. And I've done that with hundreds of people, got their feedback and kind of iterated that. And it's just really, I would say, taking every single question that the buyer or the potential buyer, the customer could probably have, and reasons to not buy, and addressing those right then and there. So simple things you can do: 100-day money back guarantee. Why not? I mean, just do it. Like, you're letting them know they can make this purchase, and if they don't like it, they can get their money back, right? Because if your product's that good, you shouldn't have to worry about that. And that's the type of thing that Amazon does. I mean, they offer free returns. You can tell Amazon that you don't like their product, they'll probably give you your money back. If you have that level of confidence in your product, that will transcend the computer screen and the phone screen, and that your customer will really understand that, and they'll understand that this is the product that they should have and they should want, because you're using those things like saying that. I mean, there's this one brand I know that they do a 200% money back guarantee. They will actually pay you if you don't like their product. I mean, to be honest, I mean, that sounds like a strategy. It's like, oh, why would you pay the customer? But how many people are actually going to follow up on that, right? And it just shows the level of confidence in their product. So I would say there's just a lot of things there that you can do that differentiates yourself in ways that, it doesn't cost any money up front. It's just really showing that your product is better. Because, in a lot of these industries, apparel, for example, all t-shirts are going to be the same. So you have to sell them in different ways and kind of non-conventional ways, right?
And again, I would just encourage you to go look at some of those websites of those businesses that we talked about, to kind of look and see exactly what we're talking about, the 6 phases, because again, your product or service has got to encompass all of the attributes that we talked about, from a unique selling proposition, a value proposition. You have to be hitting the right target audience. That's the biggest thing, how you get people to stay, is that make sure that your message is resonating and that you're going after the right target audience that's going to benefit and understand why choosing your business or service is going to help make them better or their business better. Good question, though. And
I think one additional thing we can add there is, so as part of that customer journey, if a customer goes to your website and they don't have their wallet on, they don't have their credit card on and they, let's say, drop off the part of the funnel right there, you don't want to lose them. And there's something that you'll notice if you're on your phone and you go to all 3 of those websites, a little thing at the bottom is going to pop up and say, text this number for 15% off. And the reason we do that is even if you don't make a purchase right away, that allows us to get your contact info. And there's some automation set up on all 3 of those that they're going to receive a text the next day with a % off code. They're going to receive a text 3 days later with, hey, did you check this out? I mean, it differs from brand to brand, but really just it's by the time you've gotten to your website, you've already paid for them to be there. It's free at that point, and it's something like that is only going to increase conversion. And then it just gives you a bunch of data too. You have all these phone numbers. When you release a new product, you have all these people to text about it. So it's just stuff like that kind of thinking outside the box and really trying to maximize the dollar value of that website visitor that it's going to pay off long term.
Good stuff. Good question. Good feedback. What's the next question, Natalie?
Yeah, that was great answers. And then Steve, just since you mentioned it, Josh Kelly, one of our assistant general managers, did put the e-commerce website links in the chat function. So if y'all are interested in clicking on those, easy access, then the 3 of those are over there. Steve and Charlie have gotten a couple of questions kind of along this vein, but one of them is worded, many e-commerce discussions seem focused on product sales. What are some key considerations to effectively apply these principles to a professional services firm, i.e. a law firm, investment bank, et cetera?
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, that's a good question because we definitely do focus on product sales, right? And so I think you would, again, just say, okay, so who is your ideal customer? Who is the ideal person that's going to procure your services, and what is going to be their mindset the second they go on your website? I mean, this is the thing. You go on the 98% of law firms' websites, and it's going to be the boilerplate that home, about us, contact us. That's not really a thought out process, right? That's not really what the customer wants to see. Why is it not just you go on that website and right away it's a Q&A, basically a questionnaire. What do you need from us? If you start that journey of you get their information right there and then, and you address their concerns, if they're going to your website, they want to procure your services, why do they need to read about us? Why do they need to click to contact us? Right then and there, I don't know exactly what the question you'd want to ask them up front is, but start engaging with them, start asking them questions. And then you can follow that up with, get their contact information, get their phone number, get their email, and then follow up on that lead. And it's already qualified. You already know what they need from you and why they need it, essentially. And then all you have to do is close that on the phone or via email or however you go about it. And it kind of goes back to the thing. Everyone, when they install a website, it gives them that home and about us. And 98% of websites follow that. Don't do that, because 98% of people do it. Kind of look at it from the opposite way. Of the second you get on this website, try to engage the user. So that's really what I would suggest there.
And again, goes back to the blue ocean, red ocean. Don't try to emulate what everybody else is already doing. Create your own ocean and dominate it. And I gave an example last week of Dr. Hatrack, chiropractor, professional services. If you go look at Synergy Release Sports, you'll find he's one of the only physicians that does that, because that's how we rebranded him and repositioned him. And he's again, very talented guy, but really didn't know how to differentiate himself from what other chiropractors did. There were 65,000 chiropractors. There's only one Synergy Release physician, and he's it. And again, had really great skills. He's been to 2 Super Bowls with the Chiefs and the Eagles. And then I remember another one, a commercial risk insurance company based here in Atlanta, doing several $100 million. And I mean, it was like, how do we differentiate? And that's what we did, was come back and do a lot of the things and that we talk about in here is differentiating, creating a customer journey and experience that's uniquely different. And Charlie hit the nail on the head with a legal service. 98% of them are the same tried and true traditional, landing page. And again, it might have worked back then, but if you're trying to differentiate yourself, all of these things we're talking about can definitely be applied in that scenario, as well as financial services. How do you differentiate yourself amongst people that provide a lot of the same services that you do? Well, again, it's engaging them, it's providing value, it's really having a meticulous idea of who your target audience is and how you get them engaged in your product or service. And all of the attributes and principles we're talking about apply to service industries just as much as they do consumer, although with consumer side, it's so much more easier because it's cause and effect and immediate results with selling product to people. The lead time might be a little longer in the service arena because it will help generate more leads to put in the top of your funnel that will become potential clients down the road.
But I would say because it's that kind of extra step, you doing that is going to differentiate yourself from the people in your industry just on a whole nother level, because no one else is doing that, right? And I mean, just us talking about it makes so much sense, right? So why is there not just when they go to your website, especially on mobile, just text us, just get the conversation started? I mean, they don't want to read about you. They don't want to read about your law firm. They don't really care how many years you've been operating. They care about how you can help them. So if you address that right away, I mean, I would assume that would work very well.
And they sure as heck don't want to pick up a phone and call it and wait 5 minutes going through the
people don't like calling
of, if this, then that. So again, a lot of this means you have to kind of step out of the comfort zone and the box of traditional way you've done business and really start looking at things differently. And the old quote, if you keep on doing what you've always done, you're going to keep on getting the same results. You have to do something different to get something different. And that's really what we're all about. Do we have time for another question, Natalie?
Yeah, I think we have time for one or two more questions. I know that y'all touched on being able to target certain age groups with your online advertising. But one of the questions said, for companies who have a large segment of older customers not used to technology, how do you recommend making it as easy as possible for them to shop online for the products?
Yeah, so what you just said, I mean, in a sense, kind of answers your own question. I actually think, again, the arbitrage there for advertising to older customers is much greater, because a lot of these businesses that sell to them right now are not taking advantage of the things they can do to differentiate themselves in the marketplace. So I would just approach that in a way that, like you said, you just want to make it as easy as possible. And that might be the type of thing where right when they get on the landing page, you have an option at the top that says, call us if you want to make your order that way, right? You don't want to make them go through the add to cart process and do all that and click all these buttons and enter all this info. I mean, if that is the type of thing that would resonate more with your customer segment there, try it at least. See how it affects conversion. And I mean, there's a lot of different ways I'm sure that you can think of that it's like, okay, maybe instead of a calling, we could test the email or live chat function on the website, just really lowering that barrier to them purchasing and making them be able to do it in as few clicks as possible, right?
Yeah, and that's real good. And again, I don't consider myself an old person, but I am 65. And literally to get into this building today, I had to download an app. I had to plug in some information. And then lo and behold, I held my iPhone up to a sensor outside and ta-da, the doors opened and I walked in. Okay. And literally there needs to be this thought and sense of urgency that if you don't adapt, regardless of who your target audience is, and start implementing some of these strategies that we talked about, not only will you be left behind, it will be hard to make and keep yourself relevant as we move forward. And I tell you what, with me and with a lot of other people out there, these challenging times has forced me into embracing technology in a way that I have not done it before, and literally created opportunities going forward that I didn't necessarily see or embrace or didn't have the sense of urgency, and now I do. So again, it's always hard when you've been doing things a certain way for the last 10, 20 years, and then having to step out and break that mold to do things a little differently than you normally would. But that's how everything significant has ever been created, is when people get pushed out of their comfort zones and start thinking creatively and think outside the box.
And something like that gives you a lot of secondary benefits that you might not even realize initially. So say you do get your customers to call you and they are able to process the order over the phone. And then they save your contact after that, right? Now you're in their phone book, you're in their contact list, and they can just click call. Next time they want to place an order, they want customer support or something like that. So it's a lot of these things come with an array of additional benefits that a lot of people don't even realize or notice up front, right?
Great. Time for one more, Natalie?
Yeah, time for one more, and I think this will be a pretty quick answer. But we had somebody ask, you've mentioned Shopify a few times. Is that your go-to platform? And if so, why? I'm coming from a WordPress background, but I'm open to being swayed.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say anyone that has an e-commerce presence, switch over to Shopify now. I mean, we have clients on BigCommerce, Squarespace Commerce. There's just nothing better. And a lot of it may just be as simple as that it naturally is a platform that is centered around e-commerce. So their checkout they've put a lot of thought and time and effort into that they are automatically sent abandoned cart emails. They have an array of themes available that are specifically for e-commerce websites. And so it's just kind of putting you in that space and making sure that there's a lot of things that you might not even notice or know. Like it could just be as simple as the website footer or the position that the cart button that Shopify is going to take care of for you. And especially the post-purchase flow. I mean, Shopify automatically sends order confirmation emails, out for delivery emails, shipment delivered emails. You can easily. And okay, so then this is the really the selling point of Shopify. It has an outstanding app market, and so on the average store we work on, we probably have between 15 and 20 Shopify apps on there. And the way I view these is they're almost an employee, each of them. So, for example, on my personal brand, we have this app called Returnly, and it manages the entire return process from the start. So you can go on the RO website and you can click on automated return portal. So customer enters their email, it pulls up all of their orders. They can choose which one they want to return. It prints them a shipping label right then and there. It tells them all of the steps we're going to take, how the process is going to go once we receive that. Then once we receive it, from our point of view, we can just click one button, they get issued store credit, they can place another order right then and there. So that's the type of thing, that app, which costs, I think it's $149 a month, that 10 years ago would have been one person's job. I would have had to hire an employee for 40 hours a week just to manage that. I mean, we get 300 returns a week. And that's the type of thing that I can literally go to a Shopify store, click on the app store, click install Returnly. It takes 10 minutes to set up. And that's a full-time employee taken care of right then and there. And I mean, like I said, we use 15 to 25 apps in the average store. So that's just scratching the surface of the potential you have there, right? So, I mean, it's just, they have no competition. You have to get on Shopify right away.
Yeah. I think that succinctly answered the question. And again, it's just doing things differently based on the current reality, and just going back, remember the first role of a leader is to define reality. So I think, again, good place to kind of end here is, defining the reality for your business or service. And is it time to really consider doing something uniquely different that you might not be comfortable doing, but that you need to do? It's almost like that green frog we talked about, that everybody needs to eat that green frog and pivot and do something uniquely different with their business to make it relevant now and as they start lifting these constraints that we all have on us right now. So, there's an abundance of opportunity out there, and I'm going to go back to my favorite quote: don't let what you can't do stop you from doing what you can do. And again, if you'd like to explore this with us, we'll be happy to entertain. Shoot us an email, reach back out, and we'll be happy to
if you go to our website, engage.click, right on the front page, there's a get our attention button. Right under that, it's going to say text Charlie at this. So that's actually a phone number that you can text me on, and we can communicate that way. So if email is not your thing, if you don't want to have a phone call with us, if you just have a few additional questions that we weren't able to answer, engage.click, scroll down about halfway through the page, you'll see a phone number right there. Shoot us a text, we can get back to you that way.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody, for participating today. And thank you, Natalie and the Rome team, for hosting this again. And we'll be back next week and drill down and finish up with how to stay up in a down economy and taking the steps that you need to take to be the best and achieve the best. So thank you for participating, and I'll throw it back to Natalie.
Yeah, Steve and Charlie, thank y'all both so much. I think that this was really enlightening, and I know that we had a lot of questions coming in. So like Steve and Charlie said, if your question didn't get answered and you still want to engage with them, then you're welcome to email Steve or do the engage.click with Charlie so that you can shoot him a text. But we certainly hope that you're able to join us for the 4th and final webinar with Steve next Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. I also wanted to let you know about our webinar that is coming up on Thursday morning. We have one of our members, Dr. Natasha Ganem, who serves as the Managing Director and Principal Consultant for Lion Leadership. And she's going to talk us through leading well during these uncertain times, why strategy is more important than ever, and how to use it for maximum leadership impact, which triggers might cause good intentions to result in negative outcomes, along with a few other things that's just going to be really powerful and incredibly relevant. So we hope that you're able to tune in on Thursday morning at 10 a.m., but we'll send that link out to you so that you're able to participate. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us here at Rome. We'd love to be able to help you out and see you just engaging with the webinars and the online resources that we have. So thank you again so much, and we hope to see you on Thursday morning. Have a good day.
Thanks,